with no further ado, please welcome to the screen, Lori Lane Murphy.
Hi, everybody. Oh, I'm so excited to be here. When I was 14, I was absolutely obsessed with Mick Jagger. Actually, I was obsessed with John Lennon and Mick Jagger, and I used to fantasize that they fought over me, but Mick Jagger always won. And by that point, John Lennon was already dead. So anyway, I was absolutely enthralled with all things Mick Jagger. Around that same time, one of my best girlfriends, Megan, was dating a boy named Alex, who was 18. 14 at that time was probably something wrong with that, but at the time we thought it was terribly cool. Megan told me that Alex had a really good friend who looked just like Mick Jagger. Couldn't handle it. No, not happening. There is no way this is true. Megan got Alex's yearbook because this was the end of the school year and the yearbooks were handed out. And sure enough, she looked in the grade 12, the class of, I believe it was 1982. And sure enough, there was this boy, Paul, who looked exactly like Mick Jagger. I died. I dissolved on the spot. How could this boy exist? How could he exist and live in the same town as I do? So Megan was terribly excited about this, as was I. And we decided that we would go to the mall, which we went to the mall every Saturday, so it was not that big of a surprise. She was going to point Paul out to me. So my girlfriends, Liz, my closest friend, Michelle, and Megan, all of us scrawny 14-year-olds trying to look super cool with our feathered hair and too tight jeans and shiny pink lip gloss, stood at center court at the mall. A few minutes later, after arriving, a group of boys was coming toward us, and Alex separated from the group and ran toward Megan. As they hugged, she looked at me and jerked her head kind of this way. I didn't know what I was in for. I just knew that my knees were completely weak at this point. I look, and there he is. Dark hair, full lips, a swagger. He walked out of this group of boys, and it seemed as though he was walking directly toward me. Again, I posed, trying to look cool. He got closer and closer and closer and walked right by me. Not a side glance, nothing. But he existed. Paul, the Mick Jagger dude. This is what we'd taken to calling him. I said to my girlfriend, Michelle, we have got to follow him. We have got to meet him. As we were following him around the mall, at this point, Megan and Alex had exited, so she was no help. The boys went into a diner that was attached to the mall. And as we got in after them, they sat at a table at the back. And I said to Michelle, let's not sit too close. I don't want him to notice me right away. Michelle looked at me, took a drag on her cigarette, and all her 14-year-old wisdom said, Lori, you could sit on his lap and he wouldn't notice you. Oh, crushed, but probably true. After a couple of Saturdays of chasing him around the mall, the novelty wore off. I realized nothing was going to happen. And by the way, if something did happen, I wouldn't have known what to do at that point anyway. Fast forward 4 years. And I am, in fact, underage drinking in a bar, but that's a separate story. I'm dancing, having a great time, enjoying myself. And I glance over and I see the back of this boy that looks somehow familiar to me. And my heart arrives in my throat. He turns to the side and it's his profile, the dark hair, the big eyes, the full lips. It's Paul, the Mick Jagger dude. I had just enough of a buzz to put my drink down and decide that I'm going to march right up to this boy and I'm going to tap him on the shoulder. As I'm making my way, weaving through the crowd, I'm coaching myself. Don't tell him you used to follow him around the mall. Don't tell him you used to follow him around the mall. Don't tell him you used to follow him around the mall. I tapped his shoulder. He spun around. I used to follow you around the mall. He arched his eyebrow and said, well, hello there. He asked me to sit down. We got to talking. I was talking to the Mick Jagger Dude. We were completely enamored with one another. We fell in love on the dance floor. We were inseparable for a year. I couldn't get enough of him. He couldn't get enough of me. As the year came close to an end, I turned 19. He got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. I was stunned, as any 19-year-old would be, he all of 22, but he asked me to marry him. I said yes, but I knew somewhere in the deep recesses of my heart that this just wasn't right. It couldn't be. I'm 19. But I took the ring and I said yes, and we were engaged for about 3 days. And then practicality set in and I realized this wasn't going to work. So I asked to meet him. I took the ring off. I reached into his chest and removed his still beating heart and broke it off. It broke my heart too. I didn't break up with him because I didn't love him anymore. I broke up with him because I couldn't get married at 19. It was very hard. It was one of the worst breakups of my life. After that, I went on to get married a couple of times, as did he. I had a child. He had a couple of children. We seemed to be going on with our lives. And then in 2009, recently divorced, I was sitting at my laptop. I was scrolling through Facebook mindlessly, as we often do. And there was a friend request. I had to look at it. I did a double take. I had to look at it twice, 3 times. Paul Murphy wants to be your friend. The Mick Jagger Dude found me. After all these years, the Mick Jagger Dude reached out of the past into my present and sent me a friend request. And that was 11 years ago. And the Mick Jagger Dude and I have been happily married for the last 9. So first loves, don't ever let anyone tell you. They stick with you. Thanks.